The screen was black, a void of data that was supposed to be showing me the seafloor, but instead, it was just nothing. Before that moment, the bridge of the Northern Star had been filled with the low, comfortable hum of a vessel at work, punctuated by bad jokes. Lena, our submersible pilot, had just been telling a terrible one about a polar bear and a seal. It was so bad that even our ruthlessly pragmatic expedition leader, Dr. Eris Thorne, had cracked a smile. We were a good crew, seasoned, professional, and after weeks in the crushing isolation of the Arctic, we'd become a strange sort of family. That easy camaraderie, the shared laughter in the face of the vast, frozen emptiness, would be one of the first things the silence would take from us. But then the laughter died, replaced by a focused hush. A single, impossible spike had appeared on the sonar. Lena leaned in so close her breath fogged a small circle on the monitor. "That's not a rock formation," she whispered, her voice tight with a mix of disbelief and excitement. "The profile. It's too perfect. Too deliberate." My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden, crushing silence of our vessel. We were thousands of miles from anything that could be called civilization, suspended over the icy abyss, hunting for ghosts. We thought we were looking for the lost ships of the 19th century Franklin expedition, but the ghost that found us was something else entirely. Something that wasn't on any chart, in any history book. A ship sitting upright on the seabed, perfectly preserved in the freezing dark, as if it had sunk only yesterday. It was impossible, and as we would soon discover, the impossibility was only just beginning. This is a new channel with incredible stories every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. My name is Alex, I'm 34, and for the better part of a decade, my life has been defined by one thing: the doomed 1845 expedition of Sir John Franklin. I'm a maritime historian, but that's just a title. In reality, I'm a professional obsessive. I've spent countless hours in dusty archives, my fingers tracing the faded ink of letters sent home by sailors who would never return. I could tell you the name of the ship's cat on the Times HMS Terror and the favorite sea shanty of its third mate. These men weren't just names in a textbook to me. They were living, breathing people whose final chapter was unwritten, swallowed by the vast white emptiness of the North. This expedition, funded by a wealthy benefactor, as obsessed as I was the culmination of my life's work. Our guide, Ben, a craggy-faced Inuit man who had spent 60 years reading the language of the ice, saw the Arctic as a living entity, with a memory and a mood. He often said the North doesn't give up its dead. We were about to learn it sometimes asks for more. The first twist in our own story wasn't finding a ship, it was finding the wrong ship. As the remotely operated vehicle, which we'd nicknamed Orpheus, sent back the first clear images from the sea floor, a collective gasp filled the bridge. It wasn't the Calam Teribus or the Sauk Prayer. The lines were wrong. This vessel was sleeker, a little more modern, but still clearly a wooden sailing ship from a bygone era. Carved into the stern, miraculously clear of marine growth, was a name that made no sense: Vindicator. Eris was already at his terminal, cross-referencing shipping registries, naval archives, anything he could find. He found nothing. It was a ghost ship in every sense of the word. It had no history. It simply was. Against Ben's quiet, respectful warnings about disturbing a place that was so obviously a tomb, Eris made the call.
"We're going down,"
he said, his voice buzzing with the thrill of pure discovery.
"Lena, Alex, suit up."
The descent in our small submersible, the Charon, was like sinking through a frozen dream. The world outside our tiny viewport dissolved from blue to gray to an absolute, featureless black. The only sounds were the hum of the life support and the frantic thumping of my own heart. And then, there it was, the Vindicator, illuminated by our powerful lights, emerging from the gloom. It was breathtakingly, unnervingly pristine. The wood wasn't rotted. It was stained dark by the water, but solid. The rigging, though collapsed, lay across the deck like sleeping serpents, not decayed threads. As our lights played across the captain's cabin at the stern, I saw something that made the blood in my veins turn to slush. A face. A human face, pale and serene, staring out of the cabin window. I choked on my breath.
"Eris, did you see that?"
Lena, her hands steady on the controls, zoomed the external camera in. The face was still there. It wasn't a crew member looking out. It was a body, perfectly preserved, suspended in the water inside the cabin, its eyes wide and empty. A silent, frozen watchman. We found more. Through the grimy windows, we could see other figures inside, some sitting at tables, others in their bunks. They didn't look like they had starved or frozen in panic. They looked peaceful, as if they had simply fallen asleep. Eris, ever the scientist, began hypothesizing immediately.
A sudden release of trapped gas from the seafloor? Methane? It would have been quick, painless.
It made a cold, logical sense, but it didn't feel right. It felt too neat for the profound wrongness of the scene before us. The prize find came from the captain's cabin, a leather-bound logbook. It turned out to be a personal journal. The ink was Russian. The name on the inside cover read, Captain Ava Rostova. My historian's brain went into overdrive. A female captain of a vessel this size in what we estimated to be the late 19th century? Unheard of. The journal started normally enough. They were a private expedition, seeking the fabled Northwest Passage, just like Franklin. But as we translated further, the entries grew stranger. Captain Rostova wrote of the oppressive silence, how it seemed to have a weight. Then she mentioned the music. She first called it the ice song, then the frozen music, and finally, the silent song. She described it as a melody you didn't hear with your ears, but felt in your bones, a low, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the ice, the water, the very air itself. It grew. It became more complex, more compelling.
It is a siren's call for the soul,
She wrote.
It promises a quiet eternity, a release from all striving. My crew grows listless. They stare out at the ice for hours, their faces empty, but their eyes are not. They are listening.
A shiver traced its way down my spine. Outside our reinforced portholes, the Arctic night was absolute, and for the first time, I noticed the silence wasn't empty. There was something underneath it, a faint, sub-audible vibration that I'd unconsciously been filtering out. It felt like the deep, resonant thrum of a colossal cello string being plucked miles away. Lena had her hand pressed to her ear.
Do you guys hear that? A low-frequency hum. It's not on any of our sensors.
Eris, of course, scoffed.
It's sympathetic resonance from the engines. We're tired. We're on edge. It's natural to be suggestible.
Later that evening, I found Ben staring out at the darkness.
The scientist does not hear it.
He said, his voice a low rumble.
My grandmother told me stories of the asterisk Kyler Tetang asterisk, the one who lives in the deep ice. It sings to the lonely, to the lost. It promises warmth and company, a place in its choir. But it is a hunger that only eats echoes.
He wasn't telling me a myth, he was giving me a warning. The tension on the Northern Star began to coil tighter. The strange hum was a constant presence. Crew members who had been friendly and professional became withdrawn and irritable. I found out why a few days later. I saw Gregor, one of our engineers, pressed against the bulkhead in a service corridor. He was pale, clutching his head, his knuckles white.
They're watching,
He whispered, his eyes fixed with terror on a blank stretch of wall behind me.
the faces in the ice. They're singing.
The medic said it was a severe migraine brought on by the atmospheric pressure and stress. He was one of 3 crew members who requested immediate transfer at our next supply stop, citing the same debilitating condition. I found the entry in Rostova's journal that marked the beginning of her cruise end. Asterisk, October 14th. The first man is gone. Young Pyotr. He said the song was calling his name, promising him a sun-warmed shore. We saw him walk toward the pressure ridge, humming a tune I could not hear, a look of sublime joy on his face. He did not take a coat. The silence he left behind is louder than any storm. My God, the bodies in the ship, they hadn't been trapped. They had chosen to stay. What kind of person makes that choice, or what kind of power could compel them to? Have you ever felt a pull toward something you knew was dangerous, but couldn't resist? The conflict between Eris and me came to a head.
A danger? Alex, it's a sound.
Eris snapped.
You're reading a century-old journal from a woman who was likely suffering from scurvy-induced psychosis.
And the bodies, Eris? I shot back. And Gregor, pressing himself into a wall because he saw singing faces in the ice? Why have 3 of our own crew asked to be relieved from duty? His face hardened.
There are a dozen rational explanations.
But I could see a flicker of doubt. The turning point came when Lena ran a deep diagnostic.
This is weird,
she said, pointing to a waveform. It looked like random static, but when she applied a series of filters, a pattern emerged. It was the hum. It was real.
It's not just a sound,
Lena said, her voice awed.
It's information. It's like a signal, but its complexity is off the charts.
The blood drained from Eris's face. The silent song wasn't just in our heads. It was a signal, and it was getting stronger. We were living in the final pages of Eva Rostova's journal. Her last entry was almost illegible.
The song is so beautiful now. It fills everything. It promises me a place in the choir. We will sleep now and sing forever. It is not an end. It is a transfiguration.
What would you have done in my place? Trust the science that was failing, or trust the chilling words of a woman who had lived this nightmare over a century ago? Let me know in the comments. I honestly don't know what the right answer was. That night, it reached its peak. It was no longer a subtle hum. It was a palpable presence. You could feel it in your teeth, in the marrow of your bones. A fine blue static danced along the metal handrails, and the air itself seemed to shimmer, distorting the warning lights into blurry streaks. The air carried a smell, the sharp, sterile scent of ozone, and beneath it, the phantom tang of sea salt after a storm that our instruments insisted wasn't there. Inside the pressure wave, I could finally hear it clearly, a melody, the most beautiful and desolate thing I had ever heard. I found myself walking toward the outer deck, drawn by an invisible tide. The pull was immense, a deep, instinctual yearning for the peace it offered. No more research, no more striving, no more fear. I was halfway to the airlock when Ben grabbed my arm. His grip was like iron.
Do not listen, Alex.
He hissed, his voice raw.
It is the lie of the asterisk Kyler Tatang asterisk, a hunter's trap. It promises what you want to hear, but its heart is ice. It only wants to add your voice to its collection.
His fear shattered the song's spell. The beautiful melody fractured into something dissonant and predatory. I stumbled back, gasping. At the same moment, alarms began to blare. The ship's lights flickered, our monitors filled with spectral snow, and Lena's voice crackled over the intercom, strained and panicked.
Eris, the primary gyroscopic stabilizer is offline. I'm reading massive magnetic interference from an unknown source. The ship. I think we're losing control.
That was the moment the last bastion of Eris's skepticism crumbled. He stared at the warning lights, then at me, then at the vast, starless dark. The look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated fear.
Get us out of here.
He commanded, his voice tight.
Now. Ben, plot a course. Lena, override everything. We are leaving.
The escape was a frantic scramble. As the Northern Star S engines roared to life, fighting against the unseen force, I took one last look at the sonar screen. The image of the Vindicator was still there, and for a terrifying moment, I could have sworn I saw dozens of new signals blossom around it, rising from the seabed. The rest of the chorus, perhaps, awakened by our intrusion. If you've made it this far, the story has you hooked, just like the Arctic hooked me. Consider subscribing, because the mysteries don't end here. We made it back to port a week later, a silent, haunted crew. The official report, written by Eris, cites unprecedented geomagnetic phenomena and shared auditory hallucinations. The Vindicator is classified as an undocumented 19th century vessel, its crew likely victims of a localized gas pocket. It's a clean, logical, and utterly false explanation. Eris has never spoken of it again, but sometimes I see him just staring into space, and I know he's listening. Lena transferred to a job in the tropics. Ben retired to his village. When I last spoke to him, he simply said,
Some doors should not be opened.
And me? I have Captain Eva Rostova's journal. It sits in a climate-controlled vault, but I feel its presence every day. I survived, but a part of me never left that frozen sea. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I can still hear it, a faint, phantom echo of that beautiful, terrible song. I escaped, but I feel no triumph. I feel like a deserter. And I wonder, did I abandon Captain Rostova and her crew to their frozen eternity? And what of Franklin? What of the Terebus and the Terror? Did they hear it too, that siren call from the ice? Did 129 men lost and starving hear a promise of paradise and simply walk towards it, leaving their ships to the ghosts? What do you think happened out there? Was it a natural phenomenon, a psychic event, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts or theories